Okay, so it's time to start this session. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this theme talk. Welcome to those of you who are watching this online as well, of course. And a very special and warm welcome to the Stockholm Junior Water Prize finalists. It's an honor to have you, and it's a pleasure to see all of you again. I hope you had a lovely week so far and that you enjoyed the things we did together yesterday. My name is Anna Hildell, and I am the host of today's session, which will be focused on how to build a more equal, diverse, and inclusive workplace and world. On behalf of Xylem, who is the founding sponsor of the Stockholm Junior Water Prize, and my 22,000 colleagues around the world, I feel extremely humble and proud and honored to be hosting this session today. At Xylem, we recognize the power of diverse teams. We know how important diverse perspectives, ideas, and voices are to our mission to solve water. We wouldn't be the company we are today with more than a century of innovation if we didn't have those perspectives, thoughts, and ideas. And we're all grateful that you have joined us today in this important conversation. It's our responsibility together, women, men, all genders alike, to close the gender gap, and we all stand to benefit. It's very encouraging to see that this year's finalists, for the first time, I believe, have more girls than boys in the final. Yeah. However, what research tells us and what working in the water industry has shown me is that somewhere along the way from where you are today, girls pursue careers outside the water industry and the wider tech industry, and we want to change that. So during the next hour and a half, we will look deeper into this important issue and topic with an interactive session together with you and a panel with water experts who are, I know, very eager to share their experiences with you and probably learn a bit themselves along the way. So, to guide us through the session today, it's my pleasure to introduce today's moderator, Kanika Thakar. Kanika is a Green Response Advisor at the Swedish Red Cross. She works there to reduce the environmental and climate impacts of humanitarian wash and health programs across the globe. She is also the founder of #ToiletTalk, so check that out. A warm round of applause for Kanika. Welcome up on stage. Thank you so much. Thank you. Yes. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. Big thanks to Anna and Xylem for organizing this session, and hello everyone. Thank you for being here. And I just want to start by saying, and I know you're all tired of hearing this now, but it's so great to be here with the Stockholm Junior Water Prize finalists. You are all so incredible, so inspiring. Your projects are changing the world. I know you've had a week of people just fawning over you, but I'm just another fangirl, okay? Anna, you were asking me earlier, why am I fighting for gender equality? And I fight for gender equality because it's super important in my work as part of the Red Cross movement. The Red Cross movement, the Red Crescent movement is the world's foremost humanitarian aid organization, which means that wherever there's a disaster, no matter how big or how small, I'm just gonna reset my timer here. No matter where the disaster is, no matter big or small, the Red Cross and Red Crescent is there. My role specifically focuses on international disaster response. And so when you're working in the wake of a major emergency, such as a massive earthquake, a tsunami, or a conflict like the current war that's ongoing in Ukraine, you quickly see how women and men, boys and girls, and also gendered minorities face those impacts very differently. and particularly how women and girls struggle to often rebuild in the same way because they're often forgotten about and abandoned by the very systems that are supposed to be there to protect them. Often because those systems are not designed with women in the room or they're implemented without the important inputs of women and girls. There have certainly been some advancements in these areas. You know, we have Sustainable Development Goal 5 that's there to enshrine the responsibility of all countries, organizations, and people around the world to work towards equal participation of all genders in society. But gender equality isn't supposed to just be this fundamental human right that we're aspiring to. It means something. It actually makes a lot of sense. The research shows us that when we have women and girls represented in decision-making, outcomes are better for all. Women who are engaged in peace-building processes, peace treaties on average last 7 years longer. Companies that have a more diversified board and executive teams, they see higher profits. And in my world of international aid and development, when we have gender equality in planning, our responses are more likely to reach more women and men, boys and girls equally, and that translates to aid efficiency. Yet despite all that we know and how great gender equality is for us and our planet and our economies, we still see so many challenges and barriers to women and girls to freely participate. And we especially see these barriers coming into play when we look at the proportions of women and men in careers such as tech, engineering, mathematics, research, and science. We are so excited to see the diversity in this room, to see for the first time ever, as Anna said, more girls than boys, young women and young men as part of the Stockholm Junior Water Prize finalists. We, as selfish as we are, as people who are already working in these fields, we want to keep you here. We need you in this room. We need you to transform the way that we're doing things, because the way we've done things so far, it's working, but it could be so much better, and that's what you bring. So when we first arrive on this planet, we know that, okay, things are more or less equal, but as we age, are educated, and get higher up into our different careers, that's where the gender crap starts to really creep in. We start to see the world, so we start out 50% roughly women, right? But then when we look at sectors like water and sanitation utilities, we shrink down to 18%. And then when we look at really prestigious prizes like the Nobel Prize, for those awardees for science-based prizes, we only see 3% women's representation. And even then, those prizes are often shared with male peers. So whether it's by intention or not, the world as we know it today has been largely designed for men, and thus, is largely designed by men, and thus for men and with male bias. Which means that we all have a lot of work to do, both as women and men, to fight our inherent bias and claim the space that is rightly ours as women. Ladies in this room, you have to be bold. You have to take up your space. You have already proven as SJWP finalists that you can be innovative, daring, and are among the brightest minds in the world. Don't hold that back. Don't be shy about it. Be proud. And guys, you've proven that you have the ability to question the norm, to change things, to see things differently. And I see every year with the SJWP finalists, you are incredible supporters of your female colleagues. So when you see your female friends taking space and making noise, I hope you are only there to support them. My journey in STEM started because I was interested in science, but also partly because I was told that girls don't do science or don't do well in science. And I've got to tell you, I love to push boundaries. I love to break expectations. And that was part of my drive. It often has meant the path is uncharted or challenging, but it's been worth it. I have unfortunately been laughed at by men in meetings, men who told me that they didn't think that I would be able to come up with ideas like that. I have been told by both men and women that maybe I'm too delicate for a situation, or that it's too risky for me, or that I should let real technical experts do that work. It's frustrating and it's infuriating to live through those moments. And it's worse when it's women who do it with you. But through those moments, I have found that the most important thing to do is to find the right people to surround myself with. Women who will go and share my name in a room full of opportunities, and men who go out of their way to make sure to have space for me. I've also found that while I'm often the only woman or only woman of color in an international decision-making or technical planning meeting, there is a whole world of women and men out there who are so happy that I take up that space. And that brings me to this photo. It is arguably one of the worst photos of me ever, but it's also one that really warms my heart. This photo was taken on the Sudanese border with Ethiopia shortly after the conflict in Tigray started. Thousands of people were crossing the border every single day to escape violence, and I was deployed to support the Sudanese Red Crescent to supply water to a refugee camp that would be opened within 3 days, and where 40,000 people were already waiting to be settled. The group with me is of Sudanese Red Crescent Society volunteers who were trained in setting up the water treatment system. But they had never before met a female water, or what we call WASH, technical advisor. And they were so excited to meet me and want to take a selfie with me. This selfie was their idea. I don't do selfies. This was them. They could have easily decided to ignore me, to not want to work with me, to only work with my male white colleague who was deployed with me. Many parts of Sudan are very conservative and see very little female participation outside of the home. But here, these young men were excited to meet with me and work with me and share their experiences. In Haiti, I was the only female WASH coordinator among all the humanitarian partners for the first month, or nearly the first month, after a massive earthquake and 2 tropical storms hit in 2021. Having my voice in that room meant that we stopped just talking about pipes, pumps, and distributing water to people. Of course, that's our core operation. But we also distribute things like mosquito nets, laundry soap, and household chlorine tablets for water treatment. Those items can be dangerous to people and environment if not used properly. And we know that as technical advisors, but I was the only one in the room who was demanding that we need to include training to a largely illiterate population that we were working with to know what these items are and how they need to be used. When on my missions to Bangladesh, I have worked with a range of volunteers, and most of my work there has been focused on the Cox's Bazar refugee camp, which is home to more than 800,000 refugees. There, I've worked very closely with female volunteers who were able to share with me their challenges of dealing with their periods while working all day in a refugee camp with little access to the resources that they need. And also working with a group of widows who were able to share with me that they were being denied access to a water pump by their surrounding community because of prejudice. Having somebody in the room who looks like you, who can empathize with you, who you feel comfortable talking to, that means that you can take those ideas and challenges onwards and do something about them. Being a woman in the room can save lives. Being someone that somebody can relate to can change lives and make everybody's outcome better. So just like that photo tells a story of change, the statistics also tell us a story of change. And now I have to find my notes. But we have to decide, both women and men, that we want to make these spaces safe and welcoming for women to freely participate. Ladies, You have to know the path ahead of you to stay within the technical sectors can be challenging. But if we go together and we do our part to make sure that it's easier for women to participate, we're all going to be better off. Do what you love, do what makes you happy, and don't let any other preconceived notion or bully stop you from doing that. And guys, you have a very big responsibility to demand better. Ask why you don't see more girls and women in a classroom, in a workplace, on a television show. When you draw attention to it, others will notice. It's like when you start talking about red cars, and then all of a sudden you start to see all of the red cars. Well, now start talking about the lack of women and girls around you in the different settings that you work in. And suddenly you will start to notice where that gap is. And with that, I would like to invite our panel onto the stage for today's discussion. So today for our panel discussion, we have Dr. Lara Fowler, who is a professor of teaching, interim chief sustainability officer, and interim director of the Sustainability Institute at Penn State University. Lara is an attorney and mediator who focuses on environmental, energy, and natural resource law with a focus on water-related issues. Welcome, Lara. Roxana Marin is vice president at Xylem Central and North Europe. Roxana leads commercial operations in Germany, Austria, Switzerland, Scandinavia, and the Netherlands, and is a strong advocate for the role of education in transforming lives and creating opportunities. Timos Karpouzoglou, I'm so sorry, I really tried. Timos Karpouzoglou is a researcher under the Division of History of Science, Technology, and Environment at KTH Royal Institute of Technology. His research focuses on water infrastructure, drawing upon social sciences and environmental humanities. Xanani Baloyi is a program officer and gender equality focal point at Stockholm International Water Institute, SJWP. Xanani's role with within SJWP's Africa Regional Center is supporting the implementation of development projects in Africa by making them more financially viable and attracting investment. As gender equality focal point, she promotes women's participation in peace and high-level processes. Welcome. So Lara, I will start with you. You started your career in the water sector more than 30 years ago, I understand. So how, if at all, have you seen that diversity has changed since you started out?
Sure, thanks for the question and thanks for organizing the panel. It used to be that I was often the only woman in the room, very regularly. I worked for the state of Oregon doing water policy, and it was based in our state capital. And often they were like, this has been an issue for 20 or 30 years, go fix it. And I'd show up and I'd be like, oh, okay, it's me again. Everybody around me is older, white, male. And it was interesting because I got a lot of, oh, you're a little lady, and I'm not little. I'm not at all small. Little lady from, the Willamette Valley in Oregon, which is the wet side of the state, and I was working on the eastern side of the state. I happened to be born in Idaho. I'd say, I'm from Idaho. And I think it was interesting because I teach negotiation, and in talking to my students about negotiation, there's different kind of power. And being female could be seen as you're less powerful. But I'd grown up thinking about water, working with water, and had the knowledge and expertise that I think people soon forgot. I think it was my 22nd or 23rd birthday. I was talking to somebody, and I was like, oh, how old do you think I am? And he looked at me, and he's like, I'm going to guess young. I think you're 39. I was like, oh, no. But, so it was interesting, right, just to see how people perceive you in that time. I also remember about 20 years later, I was working as a water mediator, a third-party neutral, having discussions about water. We were dealing with who gets to store and use groundwater in the greater Los Angeles area. And I looked around the room and I thought, wow, things have shifted. I am no longer in a room of older white men, but I am in a room of diverse ages, diverse perspectives, and it was about half women. And it wasn't that people weren't arguing any more vociferously for their colleagues and their clients, but it had just shifted. And so when I started working on water, I thought, oh, I'm really interested in this, I'm curious about this, but there was no path forward. I made up a degree in water resource management as an undergraduate. Now there's lots of programs, there's lots of pathways. So what we've heard over the last couple of days really resonates, which is sometimes you do have to chart your own path. And I do see that world really shifting and opening up more to a whole range of perspectives, including different genders.
Wonderful. I mean, thank you so much for that reflection. I think it really resonates, and I think it's something that we all need to take with us, whether we're young women or young men here. I mean, the need to chart our own path is very much part of the future, but also as you said, seeing that change and being able to continue to advocate for that change is really strong. Thank you so much for that. Roxana, I've heard you talk about your passion for education, and I know you feel really strong about it. So maybe you can share with us a little bit how education contributed to your journey and your career to here today. Thank you.
Yes, so thank you. And Laura, we have so many common experiences, but I agree with you. It's so refreshing to see how the situation has improved in the last years tremendously, I would say. So for me, education is key. And I speak from own experience. I grew up in communist Romania. I remember writing homeworks at candlelight because we didn't have electricity, or traveling 1 hour to school. Those were the first years. And then the hyperinflation in post-communist era. But, and I also, I come from a family where my parents couldn't go to university because their parents were not members of the Communist Party. So they bet everything on education. It was very important for us. So I always had this support from the family, but also had the chance that in Romania education was for free. State education is for free. It's even today, including university, if you have good grades. So it depended on me and the homework. And back then we didn't have all the nice tools we have today. So homework meant 4 or 5 hours of countless mathematics exercises. And I do love mathematics. I'm proud to say I'm a nerd. So that was fun for me. But what in hindsight that taught us back then, and not only me, but also all my colleagues, was that those long hours of homework taught us about time management, about efficiency, and most important, about logic, and about how to do about the decision-making process, and about solving problems. And that helped me throughout my entire career. So my first advice to young people would be, do that homework. Be prepared for that class, because any piece of knowledge might come in handy afterwards. For example, I didn't know that geology, the hours of geology might be interesting, but later on I ended up unexpectedly in the cement industry, and I impressed a bunch of engineers with my knowledge of pyrite. So that's the first thing. Secondly is really take every opportunity. My first part-time job at university was offered by a member of the jury at a students' competition. Not as prestigious as the competition you are in, but a students' competition. My second job came from a second member of the jury of another students' competition. My job in the cement industry came because I was recommended by a colleague of mine from a students' organization, ISEC organization. So opportunities appear. So my point is, do that internship, go to that students' organization, take that camp, go to that party, find your like-minded people, and take every opportunity. So that's my second, let's say, advice. I'm humble to say advice. And then the third one is really find your passion. You can try everything, find your passion, and be passionate about. Be the best at your passion. You don't have to be the best of everything, but be motivated and be the most motivated candidate, because then you will get that job you want. And do not say no, because opportunities appear all the time. I mean, as I said, I didn't plan to be in cement. I ended up 17 years in cement, loved every job. And at some point I was offered a job in UK, one in US and one in El Salvador, living in Switzerland at that time. And that's another piece of advice. Take the job where you can learn the most and where you can have the highest impact. So what I asked then is, where is the highest responsibility? El Salvador. So I went to El Salvador, loved the job, was my destiny to be there, and that shaped me. So maybe, it sounds like, not all of us, we have the same opportunities and life is unfair and so on, but at the end of the day, if you do the work and you do the homework and you become passionate about it and you take every opportunity, the path will go forward.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Roxana. I mean, and I think... So maybe you have to do your homework, but also be open to those opportunities. I think that's what I really hear there as well. And I think that's also a theme that's going to come later in the discussion, using that network and finding sponsorship and mentorship, super important. Timos, based on your research with water, which seems to be quite expansive, what has been your source of inspiration and how has it helped you think about gender in different ways? And do you have any maybe advice for the young talents in the room who want to pursue a career in the water sector?
Yeah, thanks. I'll try and bring a bit of a male perspective here from the panel. And I think one thing I want to sort of touch upon is the way that a lot of female colleagues and mentors have been an important source of inspiration in my career. And I think sort of already from my PhD times, I had the luck to have two supervisors that were both female, and I think that in many ways shaped both my ideas about mentorship, but also my ideas about what kind of issues I want to look at in terms of water. And just sort of a couple of characteristics that I particularly appreciated from my female sort of mentors were the fact that they were very good listeners, and they helped me at many points to sort of overcome barriers that if they hadn't been that good listeners, it could have been that I sort of stopped my doctoral education entirely. So I think those are features that I haven't seen often in male colleagues, and so I try to sort of take those further in supervising students myself now. And another thing I think that is often missed out and neglected is the role of thinking around water from an interdisciplinary perspective. While STEM is important, we really need to understand the power of social structures. Even when we are proposing a new innovation, and I know a lot of fantastic innovations have been proposed by many of the young panelists, young talents here today, but I want to encourage them to think a lot around the way such innovations or ideas about water travel into very contested contexts where there are often hugely intractable gender imbalances. So we need to think a little bit around the role of innovation in its social context. And I think that's something also that I've taken from many of my female colleagues over the years. And I can say that in my field today, some of my most inspiring role models are actually leading female scholars. So I think it's fair to say that we do need more of these kind of scholars in the water field today. So I have an important advice here for young talents interested in water is that to be open to female role models, and I think that is particularly true both for some of the male and female participants, that they need to be open to these female role models because they can definitely open different ideas around thinking about their career paths. They might make them shift their career into more interesting and promising directions. And I also want them to sort of think about the kind of different types of support they can get. Maybe at this stage they might be thinking about mentors that might help them to navigate their careers into certain directions. Think about having a female role model here. I think that will help you irrespectively if you're a man or a woman in sort of addressing some of these very complex challenges that we've heard also from Kanika earlier on. I'll stop there, and I look forward to some of the breakout sessions to discuss some of these issues more.
Thank you so much, Timos. I think, yes. I think one of the things you really touched on there is, it's the importance of having both perspectives, right? I think a lot of the times we have a very strong kind of male perspective that's shared throughout the society, and it's not that women are going to go around and, magically change things, but it's if we only have half of the population or only half of the perspective, we can only solve half of the problem. So having that balance is really, really valuable. Thank you so much for that. Xanani, in your role, you are working with water decision makers across the African continent. I mean, it's a huge responsibility. What has this experience been like when it comes to the role of women around specifically in the negotiation table?
Thank you so much, Kanika, and thank you, Xylem and SJWP for organizing this session. My experience really resonates so much with what Dr. Lara said. You might think that these issues maybe are only applicable in developing countries, but then with the little years or amount of experience that I've had, you realize that it's actually across board, developing countries and also in developed countries. I could say that I had a very young start in my career, just came out fresh out of university and thrown deep within river basin organizations where it is really, really male dominated. And you, as an African person, you not only have to cement your presence because of you being a woman, but then you also kind of like have to put in more effort because of the color of your skin, We walk into negotiation rooms and then we were asked really in one of the African countries, where are the men from Sweden to negotiate with? And then sometimes you also get asked by, I remember this particularly by African women, like you can't start the meeting or something before your white colleagues have arrived. They'll ask you, so where's the Mzungu, and it's so heartbreaking. It has not been an easy process or trying to stay in the field, but then these are just some of the real experiences that you need to be aware of that happen. And I think you will also probably experience that, but we hope through the programs that we implement, like one that we've started now, the Women in Water Diplomacy Network, where we're trying to uplift a network of women from across the Nile Basin all the way down to the Zambezi River Basin, where there's I don't know how many women in the sector that we've brought together, and today I tap into that network as my source of knowledge, as my source of encouragement, as my source of guidance in the sector. So I think this ties into the breakout session that we'll be speaking on, the role of sponsorship and just the role of networking. So I would say that from my experience, what has kept me going, it's not only the women network, yes, but then I also have incredible men that I work with who also make sure that there's space for me on the table. Or when they would be invited, I have a director and I'm so proud of him, Anton L. He will not accept any speaking opportunity where he does not know the composition of the gender dynamics there. He will say, I will only accept this. Can I please see the list of panel speakers that you have there? Is there a woman or not? And if not, he would rather give up his seat to have me speak there. This is a senior somebody. So that is one role that also men have in the sector of making room for women. And also if they don't make room for you on the table, then you need to start setting up your own table. Because it's not always the case that you'll find other men that are accommodating. But then, and maybe what has been encouraging, I think I'm coming for my 6th World Water Week now. It has been so encouraging to see seniors in the water space that say, when you started, you were so young. We're so happy to see you. You've grown. I've grown in the way I'm confident about the issues that I speak about. I've grown also as a person career-wise. So it's really encouraging to encounter that and just look back where I'm coming from. And I really hope that I'll be that one person as well, seeing you years down the line as you come now to World Water Week to come and host your sessions, make presentations, and all those other things. And I'll be happy to say you have really grown in the sector, and that really makes me happy. So I really wish you all the best in your careers, and I look forward to learning from you as we do the breakout sessions.
I mean, thank you, Xanani. I got goosebumps, actually. It's just so inspiring, so inspirational what you're sharing, but I think also really important that we do have to be open about the challenges. And one thing prior to my role now, I was a gender equality focal point at CWE as well. And one thing that we found was that we started to have chats openly about the challenges that we were having as women in the water sector, and our male colleagues had no idea what we were facing. And so it's really important that we have to have these more open discussions. So I really thank you, Xanani, for being so open about what you were just talking about there, that we face it. Dr. Fowler, you wanted to add something, please.
Thanks. And I want to amplify something Xanani just said, which is building those networks is really important. As we were preparing for this, it made me remember that actually a network I was part of very early on was a Women in Water network across Oregon, and it was water leaders. And maybe there isn't one in your local area, start one, right? It was really powerful to actually have a space. And we had fun. We went whitewater rafting, we had lectures, we did trainings with each other, but it was really, really fun. And taking the fun out of into things I think can be really helpful. But this permeates all levels of power. So I was really struck a couple years ago when the women in the Obama administration were getting really frustrated. You have President Obama, who's very progressive, has an incredibly powerful wife and incredibly powerful daughters. And they were saying, we're getting talked over. We are in meetings and people are not hearing us. Or a woman would raise an idea and nobody would respond, and then a guy would raise the idea and everyone's like, oh, that's a brilliant idea. So they started a pact, basically an amplification pact of, Xanani, you just made a really good point, and let me add to it. I'm giving credit, and, right? And so that's something anybody can do, is I'm hearing you, I'm recognizing you, and then I'm giving you more. And being very explicit about it. There's some great articles about how they did it, but being very direct about that can be super helpful. I also think often about not only who are your mentors, and people have said you can create your own personal board of advisors, right? Who is on your board of advisors? This is male or female. And how do you get that advice? Those may be different from your champions who are in the room speaking for you when you are not there. You need both. So again, how do you build a network of people, but also how do you develop a very consistent way of getting that feedback? It could be, I need help looking at my resume, I want to do a practice job interview, something like that. The last thing I would say is that men and women take different approaches for asking for things. And so women are more likely to be like, oh, there's 10 things that they're looking for on a job application. I'm not going to apply because I don't have all of them. Men tend to be, oh, I got 8 of these, sure, I'm going to apply. So my advice to my own students is you are 100% not going to get the job if you don't apply. Try, right? Try and step out into that space. And sometimes it is you are asked to do something. So I was asked several years ago to write for the Supreme Court of the United States blog on a water dispute between Georgia versus Florida. And my first instinct is, I'm not qualified. I'm not going to do this. But I had been through enough discussions with people that I was like, all right, suck it up, girl. You can do this. And so I started to be effectively a rapporteur of trying to explain what was happening in a really, really complex set of court cases in 800 words or less. Super challenging writing assignment. And I remember the first time I hit send on my first post where I was like, I hope I am not being foolish here. But I was talking with colleagues later who were like, we really appreciate that you stepped up and did this. And again, I just remember I'm not qualified, I can't do this. I'm like, yes, you can. You know this material, you can do it. Let's walk into that space. And so sometimes it's overcoming that own personal barrier that can actually be really hard too. So. Thank you
So much. And I think actually, I think it's very good. And thank you so much. I mean, and I think this is, the great segue into the next part of our session, which is building on some of these practical things that we can do. Let's share some of those practical experiences and opportunities. So joining our panelists, we are going to have 4 experts who are going to be working in our breakout sessions with us today. So if they could just stand up as I mention them, we have Yasaman Safari. Yes. Oh, there we are. Actually, you're already standing. Yasaman is a chemical engineer who has worked in both engineering and business-oriented roles. I think he brings a really great background to the room. We also have Sarita Singh Arfman Where's Sarita? There we are. Sarita has worked in different engineering positions in Xylem R&D since 2011, so a lot of experience to draw from there. We have Jonas Romfeld. Jonas, there we are. Jonas is a senior director for Xylem's R&D and a very strong gender advocate as well. And Juanita Ayala. Where is Juanita? There we are. And Juanita is a program officer for CWI's Latin America office in Colombia. We're going to be moving into our breakout session, which is exclusive for the Stockholm Junior Water Prize finalists. So those of you who are joining online, thank you so much for being with us today, and we hope that you will continue to do your part to advance the gender equality in the dynamics wherever you are working. So we're going to say goodbye. We can just wave to the people online. Bye.